Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to today's webcast, Personalization, the Key to Long-Term Brand Success, brought to you by VentureBeat Insight and Autopilot. I'm Wendy Schuckert. I'm an analyst from VentureBeat, and I'll be your moderator today. Now, we have just a few announcements before we begin. First, this webcast contains audience polling. Complete the polls when they appear and hit the Submit button. Thanks in advance for your participation in these polls. The slides are going to advance automatically throughout the event. You can also download a copy of the slides by clicking on the attachments button above the polling window or above the webinar window. You can also listen to a recording of this webinar about 30 minutes after we're finished with it, so you can come back and visit on demand as well. If you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our help guide by clicking on the help link inside this box. And also, you can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the webinar. Just go to the questions button or the ask a question text area above the video window and then click the ask a question button. At this time, we also recommend that you disable your pop-up blocker so that you can participate in polls. And now on to the presentation, Personalization, how top brands are, the key to long-term brand success for top brands. Discussing today's topic are Petro from First Insight, Elena Zheleva from LivingSocial, Lesperance from GrubHub, and Andrew Jones from VB Insight. We're going to hear from Andrew first as he reveals the findings from the latest VentureBeat Insight report on marketing personalization that actually is a sneak peek at the report as it has not gone live yet. So this is your first time hearing about it. Andrew is an analyst at VentureBeat Insight focused on marketing technology and personalization. Before joining VentureBeat, he worked at Yahoo Startups, research think tanks, digital agency iCrossing, and was most recently an analyst at the Altimeter Group. He also served in the Peace Corps, where he helped to teach and develop infrastructure programs in rural districts between Costa Rica and Panama. Thank you, Andrew. Welcome to the webinar, and I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wendy. Well, welcome, everyone. Let's take a quick look just at the agenda. Here's a quick snapshot of what we'll look at first. As Wendy mentioned, much of what I'll share is from new research. You're actually getting kind of a sneak peek of research that hasn't even quite been published yet. A lot of this contains data that we can share with you today. But I also don't want to go too long because we do have a really excellent panel of some guest experts for you. If you think about what a commercial relationship once looked like, the scale was typically much smaller. This shopkeeper might have known who you are and exactly what you wanted, what you bought last time, when you were going to come in. But relationships don't look like this anymore for most companies. We've got scale that is much greater, and many companies treat most of their customers the same, sending many of the same messages and experiences to the same folks. As a result, personalization has become the single most important capability for marketing efforts today, and that's according to several recent large-scale studies of marketers themselves. We find two primary reasons for the growing importance of personalization today. For one, customer attitudes are different. They've changed significantly in the past few years. They're, on the one hand, overwhelmed by messages, they have shorter attention spans, and they're blocking marketers out. They're turning off push notifications, they're unsubscribing from emails, they're blocking cookies and advertisements. But also consumers are increasingly expecting and engaging with personalized messages and experiences. It's the ones that are most relevant that they are engaging with. And the other reason it's more important for marketers today is simply because it's effective. Personalization has been proven to increase key metrics like clicks, click-through rate, open rates, conversions, and others, often by really substantial margins. And I have a few examples here I'll just drop. Microsoft, for example, dropped bounce rates by 35% and increased add-to-cart rate by 10% by adding personalization features. O'Neill, the the surf company, increased conversions by 46% on their e-commerce site with web personalization. Alex and Annie has seen a 73% lift in monthly email revenue. And GameStop saw a 41% increase in average order value. And there are a lot more examples like this. But what we're seeing is not just that there are a few select case studies where personalization is making marketers more effective, but that it is much more broadly working for marketers. What is personalization, though? What are we talking about? Personalization is using technology to tailor messages or experiences to the individuals interacting with them. And the fundamental process of personalization is about knowing who you're talking to and then engaging them, that group or individual, with relevant content. And that aligns to what the marketing process has become today. Today, marketing isn't about the message or the campaign like it used to be. It's instead about the customer. It's very customer-centric because we can understand who that customer is, who the individual is, or at least segment them. And the process of personalization can be broken down into just a few primary parts: identity, content, and delivery. So identity is really understanding that target audience or the individual, and then it's developing content that's relevant to that target, and then delivering that content to the target, and of course you want to do it at the best time. And there's another way you can think of this, and that is who, what, and then a combination of where and how. The process varies quite a bit, though, depending on what step of the customer journey you're at. There are more channels and more devices to reach customers than ever before. Personalizing ads, for example, is very different from personalizing emails or a mobile app experience. So in each of these cases, in each channel, the data, the content, and the delivery mechanism vary, but this process stays fundamentally the same. Now, as consumers, we've seen a select few companies do really tremendously good jobs of delivering what we want when we want it. We think of Amazon and Netflix and Facebook and Pandora and Hulu and others that have set these new expectations by understanding our interests and delivering on those preferences. And those companies have become some of the most loved and largest companies for consumers. But so far, we have seen only very limited personalization efforts from most other companies. And I liked the way that the head of product marketing at Janrain, Jamie Beckland, put it, which is, I think we're in the trough of disillusionment when it comes to personalization. So whether you agree with kind of Gartner's hype cycle model or not, these are definitely very early days still for personalization for the majority of marketers. And in fact, we interviewed over 500 marketers, and a very large number of them said it was too early to tell whether personalization was in fact having a positive effect on key metrics. But if you look at this variety of key metrics, a substantial number have seen at least nominal, if not very impressive results. So even some of the more beginners have seen tremendous results with personalization efforts. It's not only the most advanced companies, it truly is a scale of efforts, and some of the beginners have already seen success as well. So over 50% of marketers have seen at least some increase in their KPIs by employing some form of personalization. What are the primary objectives, though, for personalization? We wanted to understand what are people trying to achieve by employing personalization efforts in their marketing strategies. And in our research, we found that the top objective is reaching more prospects. And number two was increasing conversions. So if you think about it, that means mostly marketers want to make the top of the funnel more relevant. And yet it's interesting because in spite of that, we found that efforts are not heavily focused on the top of the funnel right now. Instead, you can see here that efforts are more spread out throughout what you could think of as a sales funnel. Now, why is that? Why are efforts more distributed rather than top-heavy if the focus is on reaching those new prospects at the top of the funnel? Well, although we think of the sales process typically as kind of this top-down funnel, most companies implement personalizations from more of a bottom-up approach. That is to say that most companies begin their personalization efforts based on so-called known prospects or customers, the ones where they already have an email address, they already have some information, possibly some transactional history. And that's because those known customers are the ones that companies have the most data about. As we engage with our customers and our prospects, we learn more about them. This continuous process of gathering more information about them and having a better idea of who they are. It's the same way we learn about people as individuals. And we have much more data about the ones further down that sales funnel than those at the top. This image is kind of an example of how this process might go, and you can see some of the different examples along the way. As you collect more information, you have also more personal information, whereas at the top it's completely anonymous. Plus, for many companies, a majority of revenue comes from their existing customer base. So that makes known customers kind of like the low-hanging fruit, right? Because you've got data about them, and often they are some of your most valuable prospects already. Now let's take a look at personalization as it's used by different channels. Email, by far, is the leading channel where personalization efforts are being made. It not only relies on, but actually requires that known identity, though. So that's somehow not a surprise. And yet, the most common form of personalization here is dynamic tags or field insertion or whatever you want to call it, where you have this one field that you might, or a few fields that you might be personalizing, like a name, for example. So you say, instead of, please look at my offer, you say, hi, John, are you interested in this offer? Right? And so again, that's low-hanging fruit and can be accomplished with some of your existing technology, not necessarily requiring additional investment. You can use email marketing or marketing automation plus CRM and put that together. But once you start bringing in more data sources like web browsing behavior or transaction history, and then additional content like product catalog or a content management system, it starts getting much more complex. It starts getting harder, but it also becomes much more effective, because even though some of those initial efforts, hi John, as opposed to a generic message, do work, they're limited in the scale of how effective they are. Now when it comes to data, what identity-related data sources are being used most? These span a variety of different channels. So you see here some that are anonymous and some that are, again, known identity, because the known, of course, reflects the personally identifiable information, or PII. So some data also offers insights beyond kind of what first meets the eye. If you think about location, it's not just an absolute location telling you about a zip code or a city, but it's also relative. For example, how close to a store or a competitor's store are you at any given moment? Are you perhaps in a specific delivery zone? What is the weather in that location where you are, and should we perhaps show you those rain boots instead of those board shorts? And what's the population density and what are the demographics where you are? Are you in a more affluent area, or maybe you're on a particular sports team if I'm selling sports gear? So some of these data points contain quite a lot more information, even if it's implicit rather than explicitly shared. Details about your device, for example, which accompanies pretty much every request your browser makes, may also tell you more about your browser, your users. There was an example a couple years back, some of you might remember, where Orbit experimented by showing Apple users more expensive hotels than Windows users, because they had actually found a correlation that Apple users were spending more on average than other users, than Windows users. So what channels are we really talking about when we're talking about personalization? Well, search and social are pretty limited when it comes to personalization capabilities, at least outside of advertising. And the primary channels that can be personalized are really these four: ads, the website, mobile, and email. There are some others and some related ones, but these are the primary ones we focus on. And this order also corresponds to that traditional sales funnel, with ads at the top and email down at the bottom. And the data types also correspond to that funnel, with mostly anonymous third-party data at the top and then known first-party data down at the bottom. So again, you know less about your customers at the top when you're doing advertising and more about them when you're doing email. But that doesn't mean that you can't do quite a lot of personalization along the way, even when customers or prospects are still anonymous. Today, a variety of historical data is used most commonly for personalization. And this, again, is both anonymous and known data. Unfortunately, 80% of consumer-facing companies don't understand who their customers are beyond basic demographic information and purchase history. So historical data is used especially for email campaigns, and you can see some of those sources here. But if you consider for web and mobile, a different type of data is actually much more important, and that is real-time behavioral data. Real-time behavioral data provides increased contextual relevance. Understanding what action someone is taking in real time is much more important because you need to serve up relevant, personalized content in real time. And yet, a minority of marketers are using real-time data today. Just over a third, we found, of survey respondents feel that they can deliver personalized content or experiences in real time. And one of the biggest challenges to real-time is batch processing and moving data that especially legacy on-premise databases have made very difficult. For email, where personalization is done most, real-time isn't typically as critical. Most emails aren't sent in real time, so the data used doesn't necessarily have to be either. Well, that's kind of the case, but actually increasingly web personalization vendors are using that behavioral and real-time data to make email marketing more effective by incorporating that real-time behavioral data to drive additional relevance. And actually that's having some pretty impressive results so far. And quickly we'll look at an example here. One such example is Alex and Ani. They create sustainable, high-quality jewelry. And the company's email marketing is now being driven by data collected across a variety of customer touchpoints, including the website. In this case, they're using sale-through to do this, and they're able to serve messages to individual consumers rather than wide segments based on specific products, and these details come as a result of having that browsing behavior because they know exactly what kind of content and products the individuals have interacted with. And as a result, the company has seen a 73% lift in monthly revenue. And just one other example is GameStop, a video game and consumer electronics retailer. The company is now personalizing recommendations throughout their website. This is powered by another web personalization vendor called Certona. and they're personalizing their web page, their home page, product pages, and even search and shopping cart pages. And the initial implementation, because a lot of brands are wary of messing things up, was on a small scale, but key metrics shot through the roof, and now they have seen and implemented this across the site. 22% increase in conversions, a 29% increase in items per order, and a 41% increase in average order value. And after seeing that, they did the same thing for mobile. They said, this absolutely works, we need to do it in mobile, and they saw a 29% increase in conversions and a 35% increase in average order value in mobile as well. There are a lot of examples, and there's quite a lot more data, but that I would love to talk to you about. But we have, as mentioned, some wonderful guests for you. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our next guest.
So thanks, Andrew. Now we're going to bring on the roundtable discussion of our event. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, just add the question button at the top of the media player and type your question into the text box there. Then click the send question button. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our panelists. First, we have Greg Petro. During his 25-year career in the retail industry, Greg saw a need for retailers and brands to re-engage with consumers to determine how products will perform before costly investment decisions are made. So he founded First Insight to deliver what is now the world's leading platform, empowering retailers and brands to introduce the right products at the right price. Greg is also a member of the Board of Advisors of the Fashion Institute of Technology and often speaks on how retailers can use technology to identify and deliver what their customers really want. We also have Elena Zheleva from LivingSocial. She is the Director of Data Science there, working on problems arising at the intersection of large-scale machine learning and e-commerce. She built a team of data scientists whose work impacts strategic company decisions and products. Elena earned her PhD in computer science from the University of Maryland, College Park, where she studied machine learning algorithms for online social networks. She is also the co-author of a book on privacy in social networks, and she's published her work in peer-reviewed conferences and journals. She holds 2 patents based on her internship work at Microsoft Research and AOL, and 1 pending patent based on her work at LivingSocial. And finally, we have Rich Lesperance. He is the VP of Digital Marketing and CRM at GrubHub. Previously, he served as the head of digital marketing and emerging media at Walgreens. He was also named to Brand Innovator's 40 Under 40 class of 2012 for his excellence in digital marketing innovation. Welcome, Greg, Elena, and Rich, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So first question, I'm going to throw it out to Elena. Elena, can you tell us a little bit about how LivingSocial approaches personalization?
Sure. So here at LivingSocial, personalization is about figuring out which deals are most relevant for any given user on any given day. And since email is our main marketing channel, we started personalizing the user experience in email first. The data science team at LivingSocial works on developing personalization models using machine learning and statistics, and trying to figure out what patterns exist in the data for the purpose of making predictions, what type of messages and content each person is interested in. We started by personalizing the experience based on which segment the user belonged to, but over time developed more sophisticated models and infrastructure that allows personalization at the person level, true personalization, if you will. And since LivingSocial is in the local e-commerce space, working with local merchants, one of the interesting challenges we're solving for is combining interest-based recommendations with geographical relevance, which some companies don't have to really solve for, such as like Netflix and Pandora. They don't have to work with different kinds of models for people in New York versus Washington, D.C., for example.
Thanks, Elena. Now, Rich, I'm going to turn it over to you. Is personalization slightly different when it comes to food? How does GrubHub work with personalization?
Well, you know, food is something you need every day, and I think there's probably, no better use case for personalization than food. It's interesting because I think in my past experience, and I've been here with GrubHub about 4 months, so I'm a relative newcomer to food, but I've been eating all my life, so I consider myself an expert. With other e-commerce companies, you have a greater reliance on demographics, and I think that's an important ingredient, but it is a great challenge and an opportunity. Members of the same household often have very different food preferences, and I think food is also seasonal. We've been focusing a lot since I joined on the data and on understanding the patterns across markets, and I think a lot of the things that Elena talked about are true, but we also are really focused on individual ordering patterns over time, and from where people order and from what time of year they order, and even time of day and day of week. So there's really interesting patterns there for us as marketers to unfold and then, to be relevant to our diners.
Thanks, Rich. Greg, Rich mentioned that focusing on the data. Can you tell me, what are some ways that brands can utilize data to reach their target customer base that you've been seeing?
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. So, at First Insight, as you mentioned in the introduction, we're the world's leading platform for testing new products. And essentially, brands, retailers, wholesalers are using our platform to test products 18 months out to, right before market and how to price it. And the essence of that is that we are engaging consumers in product design and pricing models, applying predictive analytics, and segmenting that data to allow the retailer or brand to then make a unique offer by individual or roll it up to a geography or a certain segment based upon behavioral data that will allow them to convert at a higher rate. So the essence is, we are using predictive models on new products on how to convert consumers at a higher rate as opposed to leveraging the historical data stream.
Excellent. Thank you. Now we have a question from the audience. Thanks, audience, for piping in. Remember, you can participate in the Q&A just by going up to the Ask Question button. The question is, how can content strategy be personalized? Who would like to take this one first?
I'd be happy to take it.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting the way simply the question is phrased, how can content strategy be personalized? Because personalization is not just content. Content is kind of 1/3 of the picture. First, it's, even as some of the other guys, Greg and Rich and Elena have mentioned, it's understanding the audience first, right? So you can't develop content in any kind of personalized way until you know who you're actually trying to personalize for. So that, no matter what, is the first step, simply understanding who the audience is. And of course, there are a variety of ways, as we discussed, of doing that. There's just so many different data sources. So it depends first on your primary objectives. If it is like the top objective that was listed here, that we found user acquisition, or maybe it's increasing conversions. And then understanding where your specific audience is and who they are and what they care about at that specific moment, and then focusing that content strategy on what you know about those consumers at that point in time, what their interests or needs are at that moment or in that channel. And then you can begin to focus that content strategy on what you know about that audience and delivering that content strategy at that point.
Well said. Thank you.
This is Rich, and I could add to that. I think, there's a real question whether it's really new content because you don't have content that's appropriate for that individual, or is it a matter of better organizing what you have and targeting what you have? So,
yep.
Yeah, I think as Andrew said, it kind of goes back to knowing your customer. I think a lot of personalization is often behind the scenes, and one comment that Andrew said that stuck out to me was that we haven't seen a lot of personalization from a lot of other companies besides the Netflix and the really well-known ones. And I believe that's because a lot of what you can do with personalization, it doesn't have to start with explicit, unique content that's just for you, that's sort of obviously personalized, but thinking of send time optimization, what's the best, these are some of the basics that I think companies still struggle with, of when to send the email, when to push notifications, and better organizing your current inventory of content to pick the ones that are most relevant for you.
Well said. Thank you. So we've been talking a lot about customer data. Excuse me. We've been talking a lot about customer data, and I'm wondering where do you get started? Where do you find that data? How do you achieve that? I mean, email is obviously easy, like Andrew said. What are some uncommon sources or some common sources for finding that data?
This is Greg, I'd like to maybe take the first approach to think about from a data perspective. So, when you look at what you're trying to achieve in the personalization offers to individuals, part of it is past behavior, known entities of decisions that have occurred. As we talked about, many companies are capturing a lot of this data. And then, to the point that was brought up earlier, there's marrying it to real-time activities. And then the next piece is capturing unstructured data and structuring in a way that it can be leveraged against those two known streams. So an example of that is reaching out to consumers, specifically as it relates to, unknown items or items with little historical patterns to them, and creating a structured way of evaluating the data and the behavior of that individual. Very specific example might be engaging consumers in a way that is asking them to value products. And by aggregating that in an appropriate way and applying the right models to it, you can structure the data and then look at it against the other known streams and create unique offers. So that's just, one approach to think about how you can capture data even outside the known streams.
Thanks, Greg. Andrew, do we find anything in the report? How are people normally collecting data?
Yeah, so one of the slides I shared on identity-related data sources includes a wide variety, and there are certainly many more, and ranks kind of some of the different types of data and data sources. And again, some of them are anonymous, some of them reflect personally identifiable information, but these come across a variety of channels. If you think about the kind of data that you need to target advertisements, you don't need to know someone's name, but maybe if you're trying to get people into your store, you want to know that they're close to your store to begin with, so then location is relevant. You might be selling, I think, like NFL gear. That's going to be a very unique use case, and you want to know very specific data about your customers. You want to know, what their favorite team is, for example. I talked to an executive from Baby Center, where their most important data point is all about when a baby is born, because everything else relates to that single data point. They want to have more information about the families, how much money they have, how much they can spend, but every single company has a different audience that is unique, and that audience also goes through a completely different journey from the time that they are this anonymous prospect to the time that they are known. And in each kind of moment where you want to engage them, there's a different data point or several different data points that are going to be relevant. might be social profile or their postal address or their family details or whether they're political or not, right? And so it varies drastically. GrubHub is going to have different data that they're going to focus on about their customers. It's obviously going to relate a lot more to their more immediate need to eat something. And that's going to be very different from a company that's selling you CRM software, for example.
Well said. Good point. Thank you. I want to take this opportunity while we're in the middle of the Q&A to launch a poll question with our audience. So the question is, how would you rate your personalization efforts in your most important channel? Because I have a question that's coming up for a channel. So the options are, everyone gets the same message or experience. A small slice of users get a unique message or experience. About half of our users are getting a personalized experience, or most but not all, and every single individual gets a unique experience. I'm really curious to see what the audience will say. Rich, thinking about channel while the users are voting and while we're collecting those, thinking again about channel, what channels are you guys using at GrubHub currently? And is there one that's any one more important than the other?
Yeah, no, I think one of the slides kind of showed email being the predominant channel for personalization, and that's certainly true here. And I think a lot of that's because it's really probably your easiest and best opportunity to quickly learn and test different things. I think most customers would probably say by and large they're not getting a lot of personalization. But as I mentioned earlier, there's so much to be learned by personalizing behind the scenes and understanding when to send a particular message. With food, similar to what Elena had said, I focused a lot of time on segmentation, and there are really distinct patterns for food. People when they're hungry for takeout, they typically have a meal that they order from, and so it's not any day, any meal, anytime. People have these set preferences. So that's a great example where you can really re-engineer your back-end marketing, starting with email, but I think it eventually translates to all marketing around those preferred times to engage. And what works for food is different than in other places and spaces, but I think the principle is still the same.
Elena, thanks, Rich. Elena, you have, LivingSocial, I always think of as the email giant, but what channels are you really focusing on now, aside from email, to personalize the experience for your customers?
So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we started by leveraging email as a channel, but recently moved on to personalizing the experience on the website and mobile. And as we learned very quickly, the solutions are slightly different. In email, the most important piece of content is the first deal we send in that email, because this is what determines the subject line and whether a user will be drawn to opening the email and then checking out the full content of that email. So our models are optimized to drive the most relevancy to that first deal. When a person comes to the website, they can see multiple deals at the same time. So the personalization models try to balance relevance with diversity in order to keep a customer engaged. And as it was mentioned in the presentation, there are a number of differences when we consider website, mobile versus email. So for example, context and changing the experience based on what a person does real time is much more important on the website. Serving the right content to anonymous users also requires different solutions compared to email. So yeah, these are my thoughts on this.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to take a look at the votes that are coming in on the poll right now. Currently, and keep feeling free to affect this result. Currently, the top spot is everyone gets the same message or experience from our audience. It's 29% of our audience, and it just changed, 27%. So it's tied with the first one. Either everyone gets the same message or experience, or a small slice of users gets a unique message or experience, and that's both 27% of our audience. The third third spot there is most but not all users are seeing a personalized message, and very few of our audience members have about half of our users getting a unique experience. So any surprises there? Over 17% of our audience has every single individual gets a unique experience. Any surprises there? Does that surprise you guys?
Not really. I mean, these really are still early days for most companies, and I think, I mean, the concept of personalization is simple in theory, but I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by the idea of getting started beyond something like field insertion. And the truth is, there's a spectrum of personalization capabilities that you can implement, and you can get very advanced, yes, and it can be kind of a black box, automated. You're paying a vendor. I mean, but there are easy ways to get started, right? And so I think we'll see more and more people getting involved in experimenting, at least delivering some segmentation, and then eventually in the next 5 years or so, moving up to more individualization.
How much would it normally cost? Let's say I'm starting up and I've never done anything. I'm in the fish group where I have everyone getting the same message. How much can I expect to spend on a personalization strategy?
I mean,
Andrew, is it completely only for enterprise?
No, not at all. Many small businesses, small and medium businesses have tools in place that already allow them to do some of this with email marketing or marketing automation if they have marketing automation, and CRM maybe. And just using those tools, there are already a number of ways you can begin to personalize messages, even with just email marketing tools.
I agree. This is Rich. Yeah, I was going to jump in because I totally agree. I think that often, sometimes the higher cost can be with trying to be truly real-time, and one-to-one in combination. It depends on your the current tools that you have, but that could be where it gets expensive because it's not just the tool; it's hiring people that can operate those tools, and then now you've got more of a demand to create a lot more content, and content can be expensive. So, but you can get, I think you can, almost anyone should be able to do quite a bit without necessarily being real time out of the gate. And so example would be, think of the batch feeds that you can do, where you don't necessarily need everything to be real time, but you can trigger alerts and push messages based on everyone who, as of midnight last night, has a coupon expiring or has some other action that you want them to take or that they're eligible for. If you have that relationship, and you can look and try to figure out what's the relevant types of triggered content, you can schedule those, on an overnight process and start to get, direct, personalized content out to your most important customers.
Yeah, Wendy, I would add to this, Greg. I think that smaller organizations, retailers, folks, sole proprietorships actually are at a huge advantage at this stage. Simply because if you think about the earlier slide that Andrew presented, the reality is that when an organization is small and thinking small and intimately, there's a high degree of customer understanding or intimacy. As that organization grows through its scale and the leverage of efficiencies, the challenge is there's a complete loss of that intimacy and understanding. And what we see in the retail environment is large organizations trying to figure out how is it that I convert and what are the right segments, because the permutations are so large, and what factors are going to convert them at a higher rate, whereas a smaller organization, a retailer with 3 or 4 stores, has a deep understanding of their customer, as compared to Macy's with 800 stores. The technology will enable it. The reality is the approach to the strategy of the steps of understanding the customer have to be put in place, and I think there's a concern of moving to a point too far along that stream of offers that may disincent individuals by giving them, relevant content or irrelevant content when they're uncertain about how to present it.
Well said, Greg. Thank you. We have a question from the audience as well, and this is a really great question. What do you think about opportunities to engage customers in simple ways to enhance your customization? So say you once ordered Ethiopian food for a friend and you will never again, or bought a baseball glove as a gift and you keep getting irrelevant recommendations. What is the customer's role? And this is a really poignant one for me, because I recently bought my father-in-law a bunch of fancy bacon, and now I keep getting emails about bacon that I actually don't eat pork. So it's always kind of a little fun to open my email bin. So what do you guys think?
So I would like to take that one. So we actually think that there is both customer's role here and actually a LivingSocial role to play in this. And for us, sometimes it's really hard to infer what people don't want to see. It's much easier to infer what they want to see. And so there's this big gray area of like, we're not sure whether you'll like this, maybe you will hate this, we don't really know. And sometimes you end up seeing content that you actually really don't want to see. And the worst case, which is described here, is that you actually expressed interest in this thing. So now the algorithm starts thinking that we should serve you more of this type of content. And there are really 2 ways in which we try to mitigate that. One of them is we allow users to enter their preferences, where they can show us not only what they like, but what they don't like. And we try to really respect these preferences so we don't show you irrelevant content. And the other way is to really look at frequency of purchasing for certain types of items, so that, let's say you buy teeth cleaning deal or something like this, we don't have to show you this kind of deal for quite some time.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really great point. I never thought about that. Certain things would time out like that. Rich, what do you think? Since they called out
I think you need to hire. I think you need to hire Elena. You do. There are a lot of. If I looked like the last 10 years, there are a lot of sort of spin-off activities following sort of Amazon's success with, people who bought also bought, and people who also like, or browsed also browsed. And there's nothing wrong with those tools, but the challenge is that none of them, in my view, are plug and play. It's very hard to say, install this software, give your merchants or your business teams the rules, and then manage with the rules. I really think you need to, data science has become the essential critical ingredient to doing any of this with marketing. The days of thinking we can do it all with software automation are gone. And when I read the comment about the Ethiopian food here, I'm reading it. It says, say you once ordered Ethiopian food for a friend and you never will again, and now you get these irrelevant recommendations. To me, that's a symptom of, not having someone whose profession is to write the algorithm so that doesn't happen. I mean, because I really think that we've got to connect this new discipline with the tactics, as opposed to simply launching a tool and then somebody sets a rule that says, if Ethiopian food, then push Ethiopian food, and that's why that doesn't work. It's more sophisticated than we thought. But the good news is it's fixable, and I think having, that's why for me, I rely absolutely 100% on the data scientists to write the algorithms and produce the models so that it's relevant.
One of the most common examples of this is retargeting, right? Because you browse something, maybe you didn't convert, and the assumption is there's a higher propensity for you to go back and buy that if they just keep showing it to you over and over. But yeah, it's like Elena and Rich have said. I mean, it's kind of in a way it's broken because it's very difficult to know if you went and then bought that couch at a competitor's site. And all those ads are then wasted and, in fact, annoying you because you already have the couch that you like and it's in your living room. So one of the more interesting things is advertising has traditionally been third-party data and anonymous, right? But now this is kind of more on that advanced side, but with the ability to use data management platforms and begin to incorporate some first-party data as well, we're starting to get better at understanding customers better and be able to use that even for advertising. A friend of mine used to get a Christian Mingle ads, but he's Jewish and he's married, so he really shouldn't be getting that, right? And these data sources are everywhere. In this case, his religion and marital status were on Facebook, so if it had been possible to get a social login and get that profile data, then there's no reason that ad should have continued targeting and really annoying that friend. So as we are able to assemble more of the data that increasingly does exist out there, we'll get better at it. But yeah, it'll be someone putting together all of that on the back end to make it more efficient, as Rich said.
Yeah, that Christian Mingle story is pretty awkward. It's pretty and Harry McCracken actually just this morning tweeted that he keeps getting recommendations to buy the thing he was searching for and bought 3 months ago on the same site. So I won't mention the site, but that's a seriously broken algorithm. Thinking about best tips, I want to go around the room. And Elena, I'm going to start with you. What are some of your best personalization practices that you can share with audience members today?
Sure. So maybe I'll just limit this to 3. So the first one would be really establishing clear KPIs around engagement, revenue, whatever else you're trying to achieve. We do rigorous evaluation both through offline testing and also live A/B testing in order to understand when we're actually improving the user experience. So that would be my number one, really trying to prove that whatever you're doing in terms of personalization is actually working and working better than what you had before. The second one is kind of specific to our team. So we customize our personalization models in order to meet the needs of the business, and I think that should be true and it is true for many other data science teams as well. And moreover, have these models evolve as the business evolves and your customers potentially change. Machine learning is not a new area, and many models exist out there for personalization. However, the job of a data scientist is really figuring out what models to use when and how to customize them in order to improve on your KPIs. And the third one is, I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
Oh, so the third one is really related to actually tracking this long-term success that is in the title of this presentation, because many A/B tests are actually relatively short in duration, and they don't really capture this long-term impact of a personalization strategy. I would say that one of the best practices here is really try to run some certain tests that are expected to have high impact longer in order to understand the long-term impact. And we have done this in the past, and we have found out that the impact the impact of personalization is even higher in the long term than it is in the short term.
Interesting. Greg, how about you? Do you have any tips for best practices?
Sure. So other than reiterating what Elena just said, the additive point that I would make is I would challenge, as we do internally and our customers, to think beyond historical data. We do not subscribe to the concept and the belief that historical data is a good predictor of future people's or products' performance. So when you're looking towards how somebody is going to interact with whatever the content is that you're providing to them and their receptivity to it, there's a certain degree of, reality as you're seeing in some models that are out there that, hey, listen, if I'm buying diapers, I obviously need to see some more ads related to something that I may have an ongoing event for. But oftentimes, and more frequently than not, the historical data streams are not good predictors of future behavior. How many more blue shirts do you want? How many more offers related to those contents? But it's even taking it beyond that and suggesting that other people can give you guidance related to that individual's performance. So the essence is, and the challenge is in a best practice, is to think beyond the current models because they've gotten us to a certain point, and to challenge the organizations to think outside of what the offers might be that are related and where those data sources come from, meaning it could be not third party, but structured in a way from other sources that could help you, advise you on how that person's going to likely behave.
Well said. Thank you. Rich, how about you? Any tips for our burgeoning personalization marketers?
Well, I think what comes to my mind is to really start with your best customers and start with your order data before you do a ton with third party, and particularly if you're in if you have a high repeat business and you've got the 80-20 rule, understand your top 20%, hire a data scientist, do segmentation, group them and cluster them, and understand the patterns in their order history. And then second, if you're in a business that is dependent on predictive modeling, for example, if you're unlikely to buy the same blue shirt again, but it's very much about people who buy blue shirts also like blue pants, then make sure you hire the right type of person onto the team who's good at that and can do that kind of work. And I think lastly is in your actual communication to your customers, don't overpromise by saying these are just for you and you're not sure yet how good that is. I think there's so much you can do by being implicit to your customer before being explicit. You can still offer the same recommendations, but you can simply call them, this week's featured items, and that's so you always learn first before promising. And if you do that, I think you can get a lot of the benefit with just one or two key hires and without overspending on all the tools in the beginning. You need to learn first about who your best customers are.
Very well said. Thank you. Andrew, how about you? Any last words of wisdom for our audience in our last minute here?
Yeah, it's been wonderful having such smart guests. Have already said a lot of what I might have imparted by way of wisdom, but one of the most interesting things is as we set out to do this research, we ended up breaking it in two pieces. And the first part was all about identity and understanding customer identity, who your audience is, what they care about, what channels they're using, because you can't do personalization until you do understand who your audience is. So that's, depending on how much you want to learn about them, can be, there's a lot that can go into that, and then you've got to figure out how to consolidate some of that data and use it. And so as step one, that's that's kind of a big task to take on before you can really begin to do the personalization piece of it. So start with that and then move on to exploring the content and the delivery of personalized experiences or messages.
Excellent, thank you. And then we've got a link to Andrew's identity report out in the attachments window, as well as links to some of our sponsored content from our sponsor Autopilot. There's 3 blog posts and a marketing automation report that are available to download for free. The Insight report, of course, will take you to VentureBeat Insight's premium area. And thanks, and unfortunately we are out of time. So on behalf of our guests, Greg Petro from First Insight, Elena Zheleva from LivingSocial, Rich Lesperance from GrubHub, and Andrew Jones from VB Insight, thank you for attending today's webcast, Personalization, the Key to Long-Term Brand Success, brought to you by VentureBeat Insight and Autopilot. I'm Wendy Schuckert, signing off for VentureBeat. This webcast is copyright 2015 by VentureBeat. The webinar presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted, if that is the case, by VentureBeat Insight and Autopilot, who are solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. Thanks for your time and have a great day.
Thank you.